People immigrate to other countries for various reasons, but I will give you one. One of the reasons for immigration is to relocate to a place conducive to develop one's potential, so as to serve those in need of what one has to offer. The purpose of an apple seed is to bear fruit for the service of man who needs what the seed has to offer. Likewise, God formed each person in the womb with gifts and abilities in the form of potential to function in a specific capacity or capacities and serve those in need of what the person has to offer. An apple seed, which contains inside it an apple tree, won't release its full potential if it's planted in a warm climate instead of a cold climate, regardless of how fertile the soil is. Likewise, a person won't release his or her full potential if the person is in the wrong environment or climate. The right environment or climate needed for a person to release his or her full potential may require relocation. Immigration is an important topic in America. Opinions may vary when it comes to immigration matters, but most Americans have no problem with the idea of people coming to America legally and remaining law-abiding. Most Americans are descendants of immigrants, and they are grateful that when their ancestors immigrated to America, a fair and just system was in place that ensured their ancestors had a path to citizenship. A small percentage of these Americans have jobs that provide immigration service or immigration-related service to immigrants that came legally. Some of them treat immigrants the way they would have wanted their ancestors treated when they came to America, and the way Congress had intended that they do so. It would be great if all of them acted this way. I'm grateful for the opportunity to come to America. I would like to share my immigration story. I came to America legally to do my master's program in engineering at the University of Alabama. I worked as a graduate assistant for 2.5 years and paid my taxes. By the grace of God, while doing thesis research for a Fortune 500 company, I made an important research finding that protected public safety, transportation safety. I would like to talk about the immigration injustice I experienced, which has lingered for a long time. The law supports its remedy. Congress has also given USCIS discretionary authority to remedy a case like mine. The law at the time required that foreign students submit application for optional practical training to a designated school official at the school's international office, who would sign the application and forward it to USCIS to issue EAD card. The law set the application window to be no more than 90 days before completion of course of study. Can the date the dean of graduate school signed off on a person's thesis be regarded as completion of course of study with regards to OPT application?
No. The date the dean of graduate school signed off on a person's thesis cannot be regarded as completion of course of study with regards to OPT application because it is a date that cannot be known beforehand. Since the law set the application window to be no more than 90 days before completion of course of study, it means Congress intended that completion of course of study would be a fixed date that can be known beforehand, and known several months beforehand, so that the alien will be able to make the necessary calculation to ensure that he or she isn't bringing the application more than 90 days before that date. The date the Dean of Graduate School signs off on a person's thesis is a date that cannot be known beforehand, and therefore cannot be used as completion of course of study, with regards to OPT application. Expecting someone to submit an application no more than 90 days before the Dean of Graduate School signs off on the person's thesis, a date that cannot be known beforehand, is like expecting someone to submit an application no more than 90 days before an unknown date. That makes absolutely no sense. It's clear from the law that Congress intended that the completion of course of study must be a fixed date that can be known beforehand, and known several months beforehand. This fixed date should be on the academic calendar of the semester the foreign student will be completing his or her program. That way, the foreign student can easily know the fixed date several months beforehand.
The DSO and the University of Alabama's International Office regarded as my completion of course of study the date the Dean of Graduate School signed off on my thesis. A date that neither I nor them could know beforehand. A date that cannot be found on the academic calendar. They went against what Congress clearly implied in the law. They went against the practice of the international offices of other U.S. colleges, who were using a fixed date that can be known beforehand and can be found on the academic calendar for completion of course of study. I brought my OPT application to University of Alabama's International Office on July 26th. My commencement was on August 16th. The final grade entry deadline, which was supposed to be my completion date, was on August 17th. The DSO asked if I had defended my thesis, and I said yes. She apparently checked to see if the Dean of Graduate School had signed off on my thesis. She gave me back my OPT application, saying I brought it past my completion of course of study. I later found out, through an email from the International Office, that it was because the Dean of Graduate School had signed off on my thesis on July 9th. Contrary to what Congress clearly implied in the law regarding completion of course of study being a fixed date that can be known beforehand, they regarded the date the Dean of Graduate School signed off on my thesis as my completion of course of study. A date that neither I nor them could know beforehand.